Call this meeting to order. Tonight, we're going to be leading a pledge by Mr. Gary Clardy.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Clardy. I'd like to welcome everyone tonight. This is our second meeting on the budget. I trust everybody got the documents last week and had some time to look over them. I don't know, you want to start off?
I will. I made some notes and things I want to kind of remind us of and talk about just briefly, if I could, before we get started. We're not requesting that you vote this evening. Let's wait until our meeting next week as we go over the documents, projections, that sort of thing, and the reasons. It'll become more evident why we might need to wait. Plus, next week you'll have your seventh board member involved. So I think it'd be wise for us again to look at it really good, and then Wednesday, a week from tonight, let's kind of vote what we're going to take to the commission. As we promised to you in our last board meeting, we're prepared to go over line item by line item tonight, looking at expenditures. What we'll probably work from is easiest first is to use the 4-page summary, because that's where your new positions and your increases are located primarily. And then we'll use the 31-page breakdown if you want to go further down, but we'll look at that and kind of go from there as we look for more. The draft budget that you're seeing this evening is about $2.5 million less than the budget that you saw last time. And one of the very big factors in this is, at that time, the governor was proposing the $2 million, teacher pay. And we typically try to match from local monies for classified what we do for teachers. But the governor has removed that from it. I did ask, and in the budget you're seeing tonight, I asked Mr. Sandvig to look at something in the 1% range to see if we could cover the insurance cost increases for employees. Is there any way we can do that so that people are not actually making less money than they made the year before? So the budget you see tonight is about 1.25 or something like that. It's got some of that in there, but I mean that's still up to look at too. So the other piece, let me talk a little bit about the biggest issue that we have is the revenue piece this evening. The biggest obstacle is going to be our revenue stream, and that's what's changed on us this year and different from prior years. The good news is that the local sales tax has continued to grow. That's the bright picture. Rutherford County, the avenue and the businesses and the things, that's something that's really helped us, keep us afloat. The bad news, I guess, is a couple of things, and we'll get more detail as we get into this, but one of them is that typically Rutherford County over the years, the state budgets a certain amount of money to the Department of Education, which then takes the highest growing systems in Tennessee based on student growth, and you get some additional monies to help you handle that student growth. In prior years, we've got as much as $5 to $6 million at the end of the year. It comes usually at the end of the year for growth, high growth. And then that helps you certainly start the next year or something with that. And the governor has lowered that so much. If we're in the, and you don't know exactly what you're going to get till you see what your growth numbers turn out to be for next year, but you're probably in the $1 to $1.5 million range. Now, if I'm off, Jeff, you stop me here. Somewhere in that is what we were kind of. That's kind of what we're estimating to see if that holds true. Based on there's $10 million for the whole state of Tennessee. Okay. So I mean that's what you're looking at. So you can kind of make some estimates in that. Another thing, this reduction in funding that may occur to us is the growth funds that come with property tax as new houses and developments are built in Rutherford County. This is an appraisal year, and people watch us on TV and everywhere have gotten their appraisals at home. And in a typical year, the commission in an appraisal year very often will approve a certified tax rate. The certified tax rate is the pennies on the tax that will bring in the same money that you had the prior year. So all of the growth, additional housing and the things that come on during that year are kind of lumped into that to set that certified rate. So there is the potential for us to have $0 growth because of just new houses and all, because of going back to the certified rate. Now, if the commission chooses to do something other than certified rate, they have to consider the tax rate and vote on it. It's my understanding, the way it works. This is election year, so so we may be losing. In the past, Jeff and I looked it up today, $800,000, $1 million in growth that in a normal year we'd simply get because of new housing. And that may not happen at all this year. So even though the fact we grew 1,140 students this year, we may get the same property tax monies for 14-15 that we got for 13-14. That's basically what that's telling you to do. Another thing that's been a little bit confusion, I want to make sure that you understand that. Some of our legislators were talking, and even at the forum the other day, our local legislators were talking that, well, we've appropriated to be $500 to $800 for insurance for teachers. But they put a caveat on it. The caveat was that'll only be about 83 systems. Well, next year I think there's 142 in Tennessee with the breakup of Memphis City, 141 or 142. And the only ones that's going to get any of that is the state is offsetting in the state system, insurance system. They're offsetting some of the increase in the cost. Rutherford County is self-insured. So we're not one of those 83 systems that's going to, so teachers are not going to get anything in the insurance piece, or we're not going to get monies to help with the insurance from that, even though some districts will. The other piece, and looking at revenues, and Lisa Nolan, which does a really good job for our commission and for Rutherford County as budget, tries to help us do some estimates. So when she starts making estimates from her, and Jeff talks with her, and we're looking maybe at 1.5 in growth monies, and you're nothing coming in growth for property tax, then you're back to business tax and sales tax, basically, right? That's kind of where we're left. Some of the figures that she has thrown out for us is in the neighborhood of 2.5 to 3 million, something like that. And most good accountants will be on the conservative side. If you've been long enough, we're thinking 3.5, maybe 4, ending fund balance is good and all, like that. But the bottom line is there's a big discrepancy from where we are looking and what we may be. Our 2013 budget basically is $302 million. But if you remember, we got $2.1 million in one-time monies from the state for technology. And so that'll be expended this year. So really, when you're looking at a base budget, the $300 million is probably a better base for you than $302, because that 2 was non-reoccurring anyway. So shouldn't be counted in that. So just doing a little bit of math. If we have a $300 million budget, and our growth this year was about 2.9%, student growth is 2.9%. Rounding off to 3%. If you take 3% of $300 million, that's about a $309 million budget if you status quo it, basically. What you're looking at, if you have, and I'm going to be surprised if we have less than 1,140 students next year. I'm going to be surprised in that. So we're looking at that. So the worst case scenario, if we begin to look at it, you have in front of you tonight, we put some things in it we thought we needed, and some things that I think to make us grow, which is about that 314. But in the worst case scenario, even with Jeff's estimates and maybe Lisa Nolan's estimates, The revenue side may turn out to be 304.5 to 306, depending on what it might be. So we've got to look in terms of something realistic of whatever we might be able to do to deal with that. You know, I am reasonably comfortable, certainly going to the county commission and saying 2.9%, for us to stay the same, we're gonna need something close to that 309. You know, I'm reasonably comfortable to say that, and that's gonna be the status quo just based on it. Now, if we grow 1,200 students, you know, the state provides you part of those monies. Another thing that's kind of confusing sometimes to the public and the people that see it, they think all of that money comes from us, Rutherford County, but it doesn't. You know, roughly Jeff, and of course it depends upon degree and experience, but didn't we calculate that maybe 60% of a teacher's salary probably comes from the state?
It's lower than that.
Is it 50-something? Okay. That's not good news, but. And it would depend on what year they're in degree and experience. It's all based upon that. But the point I'm trying to make is, as you talk to your constituents, as we talk to the people in the public, if you talk about the budget going up this month, that's how much of it is, whatever dollar it is, part of that is state money's coming in. And if we go up by 1,200 students, we'll get an ADM from the state based on whatever that per pupil is in dealing with that. So it's the sharing of the money. And roughly, if you remember from the last report card we received, 5.6% of our funds came from federal, and 56 was state, and about 36% of something is local Rutherford County monies that make up our budget. So growth in students really does not typically bring in that much to us in federal funds. Federal funds are the big sources of federal funds are your federal lunch program. You know, that's certainly your largest. Title I comes in as the next one. And then we receive some reimbursement funds, which has been pretty fat, is ROTC. You know, the Army does some reimbursement in that. So if you're looking at the big three things that federal money is for us, it's kind of those. And it's not something that we have a lot to do with, you know, and it's just based upon numbers. We're about 43% free and reduced. And I think I told you earlier that we're growing about 1% a year. If you look at the last several years, you'll see that percentage go up about 1% in those terms. But Jeff has some documents to share with us. Before we look at line item by line item, why don't you give them you want to give them some of that overview that you placed in their packet? So let's look at the overview, and then we'll dig into it line item by line item, if we could do that.
Stuff at your seats tonight. And if I may go back, Mr. Odom.
Sure.
Because we have more than the DEP-generated number of teachers. And any school system is going
Yeah,
to.
yeah.
Looking at our current year budget, DEP is funding 48.5%
About half.
of our total. Now, if we just looked at BEP positions to BEP positions, it'd be higher. But when you factor in those positions above the BEP formula generated ones, yeah, we fund just over half out of local funds.
Okay.
I knew I had that, I just looked at it wrong. In what I mailed you, there was a short copy. I've added a bit more, the budget amendments and all. So, 4-page document. Okay.
Do they need to approve the budget amendments tonight for us to carry forward? We already
Yes, sir,
done.
if we could do those tonight.
Okay, that, because we do have to go to the budget and finance with those.
Okay. As Mr. Odom said, we put in an overall average certified raise. We took that salary schedule that was approved as part of our, they've changed the names, they're calling it, we're calling it our differentiated salary schedule. That is still our base, but we put in enough so that everyone got at least $120 raise. And then we put the same 1.25%, we'll call it, in for classified staff. We had discussed this possibility earlier for our grandfather degrees. The 25th year of experience pay has been rolled up to begin at year 21. So we will have brand new teacher down to 21 years of experience across the board on that salary schedule. That was only like $25,000 to do that. Historically, our nurses have been capped at 15 years of service. We put a 16th year step in our salary schedule. So I took them up to 16 years, and that was $28 or so thousand dollars.
How many nurses wasn't there, was not there?
46. We added a 47 this year, and the funding for that is addressed in my amendments tonight. And we currently, in this version of the budget, are asking for 3 more. We could not go with LPNs, as we discussed that earlier at the meeting, so they're in as registered nurses. The medical insurance is a good change in this budget. There will be no rate increase in January 2015. I have built in a 5%, just trying to be cautious. Now, but the commission had voted earlier to drop for dependent coverage, spouse and children, whatever, drop by 1 percentage point a year. So we're moving from 87 to 86% county board of ed funding for the dependent insurance. And they voted to do that.
They're moving to 80%.
Moving down 40.
Their target for the county is to move everybody down to the 80-20 share. And they're doing 1% a year to do that, so unless somebody makes a motion to accelerate it, that's what it will be.
That shift works out to a 7.7% increase to the employee for those dependent plans. And I know this, one of y'all made this comment, Mr. Odom, I believe, some concerns about you see some strange increases and decreases. These budget amendments will fix those. When I have my budget process set up so that the dollars budgeted per position generate all of the benefit costs. So as people come and go, you will see, in an extreme case, well, okay, a line item that has 2 or 3 people. If one person leaves who has a lot of experience and someone comes in with very little experience, you'll see a noticeable change. In medical insurance in a small department, if one person changes to family coverage from individual, you'll see a major shift that wasn't in place when last year's budget. So these amendments will true those pieces up. And after they're in place, and I probably won't be able to get them for next Wednesday's meeting. It'll be my goal, but I may not. I may be able to give you a copy of them Thursday, though. The comparisons for those benefit items will be much closer. But it's a snapshot of what we had in place late in 2013 for staff.
Do you want to deal with these now before you get into the line item, Mr. Chair? I'd leave it up to you. I'll be glad to read them, whatever you want to do as far as budget amendments.
If it's okay with the board, let's just catch these last and let Mr. Sandvig, and we may read all these at one time and do something like that.
Mr.
Okay.
You want me to address this?
That's part of the revenue. Yeah, go ahead and do that. That'd be okay. No problem.
The graph that I gave y'all at my conference last week, this was suggested by one of the Kentucky State officials, is something that she looks at. I did my years in the order we look at them on our budget. Typically, you'd expect them to go the other way on a graph, but that's why I'm showing 2014-15 draft budget first. The yellow line at the bottom, I couldn't figure out how to make it show as a minus in front of it, but that is how many millions of dollars of fund balance we have used to balance our budget in recent years. The rightmost column is the 2010-11 year. That's the year we opened Whitworth Buchanan and
Oakland.
Oakland, thank you. We had, and, we were able to say we could open those that cover the operating expenses through fund balance. 6 million is, it is a repeatable number as long as we're seeing improvement in the economy. Now, if the economy is going down, it's not sustainable. Then we had, when you look at 2012, look at 2012-13, that amount crept up to $9 million. We had a 20% increase in medical insurance effective in January that year, and we had a 2% state raise that year. So we had those two recurring expenditures. So we had to increase what we covered from fund balance. And we had said, and actually the 13-14, 10.4 million is very good because we had said we would do our best to cover the operating expenses for Stewart Street High from fund balance. Well, we only went up 1.1 million. And the instruction department ruthlessly moved positions. We had to. At this 9.3, 10.4 million is it is a higher level of fund balance than you can do for a long term. If you look at this, then the leftmost column, the 2014-15 draft, with this $13.7 million budget and where revenue could well come in, and we'll be adjusting these numbers, it's a $21.6 million difference, and that is not sustainable. If you will look at the blue and kind of pinkish
What can you use?
lines on the graph at the top,
How much do we have got available to use?
He's gonna give you kind of an estimate tonight of where he's not, can't tell totally, but we're getting there.
we were seeing, if you look at the pinkish line, from 250.5 million in revenue to 260. Well, when you look at the expenditures, they went up about that same $10 million. Our revenues were roughly moving up in line with our expenditures in those 4 years. That's real good. Our revenues are not going to move up in line with the expenditures. That's the cause of Mr. Odom mentioned, reappraisal year, loss of the growth money. Those are two items, and I adjusted out the 2.1, 2.2 million for the park revenue and equipment. And we also transferred 624,000 from our fund balance to help fund the Blackman Middle School annex. I adjusted that, and so we haven't got apples to apples. That's, at this point, we don't know that we are going to see much improvement in the revenues. I increased $1 million from what Lisa thought, and I think that is a reasonable number. I think she'll be fine with it after we see April numbers.
So that's what you projected it on, what you're thinking, based on April?
That's where I put the million in, yes, sir. I have a spreadsheet that I've out, and they go to like column IG. I've gotten into the H's before, and I go through columns. But revenue history since I came here, and with where we are now, where we've been in prior years, I'm pretty comfortable with that million. Hopefully it'll go up a little, but for this purpose, I went ahead and put in 1 million.
Anybody got any questions before we go any further?
Let's look at the 1 through 4 sheet, and then we can reference back if you'd like to, if you kind of begin to look at that. Starting down with superintendent, principals, no change in principals, superintendent, supervisor, director, no changes there. Total teachers, there's in the classroom positions about 66 regular ed. There's something like 11 special ed projected in these numbers. So you add that, and then we've got 4 ESL,
For vocational.
4 vocational.
And the ESL teacher number,
So that's how we arrive at the 81.6, and they will show up on the 31 page sheet if you go down and start breaking that out.
two ESL.
Like your first page of page 1 of 31, you see the regular teacher position of 66.6. The summary sheet here adds that, and as you cover subsequent pages, which you may have already looked at, I mean, you had this before, that's how you get the others, like page 3 is 11 special ed. You see there, you can kind of see where those numbers, page 4 is 4 vocational, that sort of thing. No changes really in career ladder, secretaries to the board. We put in one accountants, bookkeepers. We told you before, this is one position to how to help track. If you remember, you approved several amendments dealing with how people could do their 401k, all that sort of positions. Also, we were tracking with our salaries of 1s and 2s, which we may not be doing now. Got to see what comes out of the legislature on that. But that was one potential position back in Mr. Sandvig's office to track personnel, basically what we're doing, the changes in the way the retirement system and all was going. But that's something we can look at there. Guidance personnel. We base our guidance on the old Southern Association of Colleges and Schools formula, and we look at how many they earn, and we really haven't done much there in recent years, so we decided if there were a possibility to get about 3 additional positions to place these in schools. Elementaries, we have several that are half-time guidance counselors. High schools typically have full-time guidance counselors. But anyway, that's kind of the balance back to that.
One of those, Stewart's Creek
One
High
of
School.
the Stewart's Creek High School.
Almost certainly are.
For Stewart's Creek High School, you're going to see, we held back an assistant principal on them. If you remember the first year, held back a guidance counselor on them. They're not staffed the same as the other school. And so we have for this next year, they're supposed to grow from their 1,340-something students. Next year, estimates are from 1,500 to 1,600. The first year of the grandfathering disappears. Will take us 2 years and steps to do that. So that's what we're talking about in those particular positions. So some of these, and we'll try to point them out as we go through that and take a look at those are what we might do. Psychological personnel. One of those was federal. Both were federal that we have to roll over. If we keep them, we're going to have to roll them over to general purpose school budget. That was some monies there. So that's not new positions, but it's changing the place and that was paying for it from federal side to our local side. And that's what happens so often with the federal monies. You know, they do the seed. Medical personnel, one of those is a nurse that we already have, basically, that's be funding for all of next year that you approved, that we added. Remember, we had special procedures. If you remember that, the number of students that had to be served. So you approved a few months ago an additional nurse there. Well, you got this person that'll be in next year's budget for the whole year. And we did put 3 nurses in for growth. You know, I mean, you asked about that, Mr. Blair, and asked us to try to look at that to see if we could do that. So in this $314 million budget, you've got actually 3 new nurses and the 1 that we hired earlier this year. So that's your 4 there. The other change in instructional computer personnel, three there were three school technology specialists. And we were saying, at the time we were making this budget, it's gonna be a park online exam. We have several middle schools that have half-time STSs. So we put some positions in to try to go back so they could have a full-time STS. That's one of the things we can take a look at now, you know, to see if, depending on what the legislature's done today and all for that. Principals love these positions, they're very beneficial. They work with teachers on instruction, they also help make some repairs and do some minor things in the building. And principals really will tell you how beneficial these might be. And you'll notice that you'll see a decimal next to many of these personnel changes. And Jeff calculates on full-time equivalent basis. So some of these positions, you know, that are 10-month positions or that sort of thing are not going to be 1.0. You know, they'll be in the equivalent position for, say, a classified category based on person that's an hourly person. So that's why you get the decimal positions there when you're looking at those. The clerical personnel here, if you remember another place that we talked about when we approved it, we said at Blackman Middle School, when we opened that 6th grade wing to make it self-contained, we talked about putting a secretary there and an assistant principal there. Now, we can move teachers from 6th grade in the other part of the building. May have to add to it if your growth is there, but we can move the teachers and all. But we did talk about with them that when we opened that particular wing, we talk about a secretary. It's got a front door. It's got an entry area. You know, we kind of keep from trying to mix all the 6th grade with 7th and 8th. Secretary and assistant principal is assigned to that wing. So what you're seeing there, one of those is one of those positions, right, Jeff? If I'm off on any of these, let me know.
The other one is another position moving from federal.
From federal move over to, yes. Educational assistants of 9.5. These are a combination of special ed EAs and ESL EAs. That's what they are. Obviously, we do a lot of inclusion. Inclusion is where, under the federal guidelines, students are supposed to be kept in the least restrictive environment, which means if you can leave a child in the classroom, in a regular classroom, with assistance, then you're supposed to leave them there. That's their least restrictive environment. So what our principals typically will do, will cluster 2, 3, 4, 5 special ed teachers in a room with a regular ed teacher. And you may have an EA in there. In some instances, it might be a teacher, depending upon the level of severity for that handicap and your available personnel. Then they would be in there to assist the special ed students, you know, at the same time the regular ed teachers teaching the class too. So that's where and EAs are much, from an economic standpoint, are certainly much cheaper than you hiring a certified teacher. But all EAs work under a certified teacher. The IEPs, all of the programmatic things that they have to do have to be signed off by that certified teacher when you do that. But typically, if they're in an inclusion class, they're in there with another certified teacher anyway. That's maybe a math teacher, maybe an Algebra 1 class. Algebra 1 teachers at the front, an EA or a SPED teacher's in there to help students. Since Algebra 1's required of every student in high school, there's somebody in there to assist them and help them with small group and other things to do. So that's your 9.5. Jeff, I don't recall the reduction in custodial personnel necessarily.
One of our principals
Okay.
traded a half custodial position when it was vacant for, he was either clerical or for an EA.
Okay.
I think an EA.
Yeah. The maintenance personnel, that would be Mr. Carty's request. Last year we didn't add maintenance personnel. If you remember, Stewart's Creek High School, you have 1 year of grace. You know, that they come in, the contractor has to come in and make the repairs and the things in it. But that school, you know, basically becomes ours, other than maybe some air conditioner or things that would have longer warranties. But typically when we have 350,000 square feet of space or so there, we would like to try to add additional maintenance personnel to help us cover additional, plus at the same time, gonna be adding this year at Eagleville, we're adding on to Smyrna Primary, you know, at the same time as those additions are going on, and at, Smyrna Primary, Eagleville, Blackman, and of course Stewart's Creek High becomes ours, so, I mean, that's what you're looking at when we're talking about those two personnel there. Try to still, do those work orders quickly. Speech and language, again, was a recommendation from special education. Is that a federal rollover too? Not a new person, but that's another federal rollover. And some of that federal, this is ARA monies. Some of it, have we cleared all the ARA now?
We cleared all the ERA. These are IDEA carryover positions. And with sequestration, that bucket money is shrinking on us. And we probably next year we'll be moving a comparable number of positions also.
And the other salaries and wages, those three positions, what were they now?
2 of them are federal,
Right.
Kevin Whittington.
Out of Race to the Top, we only employed one person. It was Kevin Whittington, which is your data person. You've met him. Race to the Top's over. So basically, if we keep him, we've got to pick him up in GP, General Purpose Schools.
We have an autism
teacher
from federal.
Right.
And then the request for a science specialist.
Right. Which is one that's up for consideration of whether we do or not. Okay. And you know, basically on page 1, that's your people. But let's stop here and you go back and ask questions about the people changes here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I'll say, you know, I want to say this really right up front. When we start looking at reducing budgets, and we go from 314 to 39 or whatever we go to, you have to have some large items. And so the things that large items are personnel, particularly certified personnel, where your average with fringe benefits gets in that $50,000 to $60,000 range per person. You know, other things are school buses. You know, it's large items that's in that range. Sometimes the other things that's hit us this year, which we haven't built a lot in extra to do it, was remember STAR computer systems going out, the attendance computer, unfunded mandate. We're having to change to that. Response to intervention, requiring universal screeners, some kind of a screening testing program for students. Again, another unfunded mandate from the state. So the other items that's built in are basically tracking systems or things dealing with that. And most of your other things, you're not seeing big increases in most instances for utilities or other things that you might normally see. It's just not there in this one.
I know that in the past, we had, and I may not say this correctly, but I'll say 120-day contracts with retired teachers that had appropriate credentials that could come in and help us with evaluations. The evaluation component was significant, and we had some folks that came in and helped us. Is that right?
3 part-time this year,
We
man?
had 3 part-time, and we only did that for 1 year,
Okay,
2 years ago.
okay. So that has sunset and is gone.
Let's go.
Okay, all right. I was thinking maybe we were up enough that we could let that go. We already let it
Yeah.
go. Good enough.
Actually, the legislature helped us there. They did simplify the evaluation process some, and you didn't have to make, if a teacher was at 4 or 5 or high, you didn't have to make all 3 visits and that sort of thing. Everybody has to be evaluated every year, but they did lessen the number of actual observations.
Jeff, I guess, I got a couple questions here. Looking at our teachers, looks like the increase is what, about 6.5 million?
Yes, sir.
As far as the 81 that we're adding,
Mm-hmm.
what kind of increase did you do as far as,
Well, your dollar figures
your-
out there.
no, I'm talking about your new students and all that to come up with
New
80?
students,
Or how'd you build
I've come up
81
with
into it?
something where I am reasonably comfortable with 3 to 3.5% growth in talking to Mr. Zaga and Mr. Odom. Something higher than we experienced this year, because we're We're gonna get growth money at essentially half the rate we got it this year.
I guess, and the only reason I'm asking is, you know, it comes down to numbers. We gotta have it, so, that's my question to you is that, there's not a whole lot of play, I guess, is where I'm coming from.
We probably have some play. I know that Mr. Zago is looking at class loads, items like that.
Okay.
We have some play. We don't have a lot of play in classroom teaching positions. No, sir.
I used to do one of the things that I learned over in instruction is K through 3 is 1 to 20, 4 through 6 is 1 to 25 pupil-teacher ratio, and then of course, 7 through 12 is 1 to 30. Career and technical education is also 1 to 20. We're seeing some really interesting numbers in career and technical education. I mean, it's taken off. We have some high schools that'll have 1,800 students, and when you look at the student count for CTE, you see 2,400, 2,600, which means the kids are taking 2 to 3 CTE classes. But all of those are 1 to 20 ratios too. So what I used very often when I was instruction and doing this for Mr. Gill, I would kind of take the number of students we said and divide by something like 22, and that would give me a rough guesstimate on the budget to go back and do some estimates with. So, you know, if it just depends on what your growth is. You know, and you're okay if you underestimate a little bit on the state portion because we can amend our budget and add it. In other words, if we estimate 1,200 and it's 1,400, the state dollars will come in. But what doesn't is that if the state pays 48%, is the other 51.5% that's got to be the local part. So if you're not covered in that piece, that's not new money is going to come in as enrollment goes up because we have to present to the commission. They're not going to come back and change the tax rate. So again, it's that best guess of what you may need. We're actually looking at some courses in CTE where some courses are dropping in enrollment, combining some classes. We're having a few cases where we look at schools about how many teachers they have as teaching an English or a math or some other subject, and we take the number of teachers and divide that into the number of students that are taking it. And in some instances this year where somebody has retired, we're kind of now got them on hold. We're not telling them that we're going to guarantee you can hire this one back. Folks, when you get in a tie, you can say what you please, but it will ultimately affect pupil-teacher ratio. Somewhat, in some classes and in some sections. That's just the nature of the game.
If there is an adverse effect in pupil-teacher ratio, and we find ourselves out of step, is that a non-negotiable?
You haven't. That's why you have an ending fund balance. So what Jeff has to go back to, what we have to amend to, and while the state has been saying that 3% ending fund balance, it's for unanticipated happenings. And that would be one of those unanticipated things that you would happen. So it's not all lost. I'm just simply want to point out tonight that we fully understand that even if we go from 1,200 to 1,400, the state's going to give us only part of it, and we're probably looking at amendments from our own ending fund balance to pick up the other. But we do that, and we've done that in prior years.
But our success, and I certainly don't want to put our success in jeopardy, our success does not give us clearance to have an average, because I know that it's based on average. We may indeed have classrooms that have 21, 26, et cetera. But we just cannot exceed that average and report that in. Is there a penalty if we have?
And it starts out, and it's per section, and it starts out at about 55,000 up to about 65 or 70,000
I think it used to be 75
for, and it's every period that it happens. If it's in high school, and that teacher teaches 7 periods, if every 7 period were over pupil-teacher ratio, then your penalty. Now they will they'll let you do some average. For example, when we say 1 to 30, the max class size is 35. But at the end of the day, when you average all of those 9 through 12 in your school together, it's got to come out 130.49 or less.
Okay.
And your CTE has got to come out to 120.49. They round. 1 to 20.49 or less. So, thank goodness you have a little bit of flexibility. Our problem in Rutherford County, for example, going back to your elementary 1 to 20, we just do not have reserve capacity because of our fast growth. So when you go into one of our elementary schools and you look at the average in all of the K through 3 classes is 1 to 19.2. It may not be when 20 more students arrive. It may be when 6, 8, or 10 arrive, depending on how many classes you've got of that you're going to have to hire that next teacher. In other words, we're not, because of our growth, having large amounts of reserve capacity. Hey, we can absorb another 30 before we hire a teacher or another or something. And that varies by school, but not a lot of reserve.
And it's characteristic not only of our growth, but also of the efficiency that we're delivering it, that we are right up against those thresholds in so many places.
$1,280 less than state average per pupil expenditure.
Exactly.
You mentioned projecting 1,140
1140 was this year.
was this year.
This year. And we're using third month pay, which is one of our best estimates that we've had.
So for next year, what would you project?
That was about a 2.9 to 3, and so Jeff worked from something about, we're seeing the economy turn around, and so we're seeing numbers come in. So my guesstimate is that unless something happens with the new city school that changes something dramatically, I've looked at some of their projected enrollment numbers, it doesn't look like it that much. He worked from a 3 to a 3.5%. So you're looking at the 14,
12, 15 on the low side. To just under to 14.50 on the high side.
so that we consider was kind of a safe guesstimate based on how our growth.
Did you work on the 22 number?
Loosely, yes.
Loosely, 22.
He takes it grossly. I take
Yeah.
it more in terms of,
So,
but special ed that goes out and CTE that goes
okay, and
out.
so you have some special ed and some CTE
There are
in that 81.
remember there's 11 special ed.
Okay,
There were 4 in there that were CTE that you're 1 to
yeah. 20. So that's 15.
And you got in that 66, there's quite a few K through 3s in there that are actually 1 to 20.
Okay,
But Mr. Hicks, it's an educated guess.
yeah, that's all it
I mean,
would be,
that's
yeah.
really what it amounts to.
I just was unaware that you had included those other positions in that 81, and I was just thinking teachers.
But if we cut our budget back, I can tell you with all, we're gonna have to bring that number down. And if something happens, look at ending fund balance, because we can't get the millions of dollars without looking at that piece. I mean, that's a fact.
I think the biggest thing we have to look at, how far you can cut it back. I think and this is just my opinion, I think your 3 to 3.5 is gonna probably be light. Based on the market out there.
In 2006, Rutherford County Schools grew by almost 1,800 students, whether you remember that. But of course, your base number was different at that time, so you were saying 5%. But when you get to 41,000 students, 3% turns into a different number.
Is more than
That's more than the school
These
size
apartment
difference.
complexes that keep popping up.
I know.
I mean, they just, it's not a build out, it's just a build up, and they impact us immediately, so.
Even real estate's moving fast now. I mean,
That's what I'm saying, everything,
appointments has been made, and before you get there to show it, it's already pending, it's already. sold.
everything that's built,
It's getting back to where it used to be.
is taken, so.
Of course, the other piece I hadn't mentioned tonight, the county did it for their general, and we did it for education. We used $12 million of ending fund balance to balance this year's.
Because we also when the textbook orders came in late last year, it became very clear we did not have enough money in the approved budget, and our fund balance was good, the commission approved us taking another little over $1 million for textbooks.
So you're you're kind of starting out in the hole when you look at it that way, is what,
But the federal rollover positions, do we have to maintain those positions, or is that an option that we could cut back on if we had to?
The
federal rollovers.
We still have the students who require the services.
I would say, do you have to? Probably not. You're going into a layoff situation if you do. Again, what we've tried to do in most instances is like where we're seeing these teachers in positions that, where we look at numbers and something has changed, we try to say, no, you can't fill that now and do that sort of thing. So that's what we've done more of than anything else. And remember from some of our earlier conversations that Rutherford County has gone from 14% special education to 11%. So the average special education teacher, because of their load in dealing with them, will deal with somewhere between 25 to 35 students. It's not greatly different than what you have as a classroom teacher. So if you go 1,000 students or so, and you're still at 11% or so, you're going to be looking at 5 to 6 of those at least are, just going to probably be by growth at your current rate. The other comes in, and you vote on these amendments all the time, when some high-need student comes in or something like that, and then all of a sudden you find yourself. I tell you something that's really, and affects another part of the budget, is that we're having to place so many more serious cases with Rutherford Academy and some other contracting out. And that's something we have almost very, very little control over in doing. Mr. Zago and I have talked, Ms. Bell and I have talked. At what point in time does Rutherford County decide to run its own Rutherford type academy? And you're talking about the kids that have the most need that you have pretty much in education. It's just short of housing somebody. And you'd still have to hire all staff and all to do that. It would be an expensive operation, but it's expensive now. But you gotta have a building to do that too.
So where we got a 1-for-1 ratio there?
No, it's usually not 1-for-1, but if we, in our behavior modification classes, typically you'll put in there, and it depends on the age of the kid and the severity of the child that's in there. You may see anywhere from 3 to 5 or 6, and there's typically one teacher, one EA in a behavior mod. And we've clustered them together. We don't have a behavior mod at every school. We bus students. Mr. Snell, that's why he needs special ed buses. We bus students from one area of the county to a place where we have a behavior mod until we reach that 3 to 5. And if they do not work there, we can handle it there. Then you're into the Rutherford Academy or some other outsourcing, which again ups your costs again. Yes.
Let me go back to just our regular classroom teachers. I think every year since I have been here, I think we have had to amend dollars in, especially when the economy was down, because we got more experienced people in our budget. But I think our positions, we have always held, we think we can cover the growth we are looking at with these positions. And I don't think in radio ed, we've had to amend positions. Now, we've had severe cases come in some of the special ed cases where we've had to amend positions to deal with them and add nurses. But on classroom teachers, we have been adamant, okay, this number is the lowest we think we can go and be reasonably confident that we can cover.
Mr. Zago has a sharp pencil. And so last year, we literally took some teachers where numbers had dropped and moved a teacher from one school to another to keep from having to use another position. So, I can assure you, when a request comes in for an additional teacher, We go in, we take the counts of the students, we take the counts of the teachers, we take the pupil-teacher ratio, we run that form if it's a K through 3, where are you in that 1-to-20 ratio? And we also, in addition to moving teachers, we'll tell the principal, you're gonna have to move that second grade teacher up to fourth grade this year. You gotta do that. I mean, it's just,
I've already done that 5 times in the last 3 weeks for the future of August, so that's 5.
so I'm telling you, that's what we do. You know, I mean, we try really, really hard to utilize our people as best we can.
Mr. Sandvik, you said that there was an additional $1 million or 1 point something that we added out of ending fund balance in order to make something work.
The textbooks.
Okay,
I did not show that on, I stuck to our original.
that's what I was
budgets.
asking.
Yeah, I was trying to be as consistent as I can be.
Yeah,
Math-
but
math-
in
it's the
fact,
math issue, since it's a K through 12 book.
right,
We purchased the books for the following year in June, so they'll be here in August for the start of school.
I'm
So you
just,
got a big adoption next year.
right, I just noticed that's another $1 million on this
Right.
not very
It
positive
is.
looking graph that says that instead of 10.4, we may be 11.6, that we actually contributed
yes.
in 13-14 to make it work. Not moving in the right direction.
So I mean, when we start reducing to get back to more, whatever figure that we do, you're looking at that 1% raise. You're gonna have to take, that's roughly,
With benefits.
was it 2 million, what was it?
Yeah, it's probably
Two-
delivered.
Somewhere between 2 to 2.5. You go back and you start looking at teaching positions, you know, about 17 or so every million or something like that. You start looking at positions, you look about improvements like, can we wait another year on a guidance counselor? Can we wait another year on this? So, I mean, I can just tell you up on the front end, that is and you can do the same. You can look through the budget. All of you are business people and astute enough to know you got to go where there's a pool to do. So that's what we're looking at.
I guess I'm going back to my original question out of this 81. Is that the minimum we gotta have? I guess, because if we're gonna have to make a cut, which sort of, that's what
Some of those positions will probably have to come out.
So, yeah, those are certified, so some of those are positions that'll have to come out. Maybe when we're talking about putting in somebody to look over our science program, which we've never had, you're gonna have to look at that. You're gonna have to take a look and say, we can't do this much on guidance counselors. So you're gonna have to do that. And you know, again, is there another 15 or something that you can risk yourself on to say, if we reduce this, that the ending fund balance will help us do it if we grow? This is just what we'll have to do. I mean,
well,
that's where we are.
I guess where I'm going back to, there becomes a point where if we gotta have them, we gotta have them. And that's what I'm getting back to. If we gotta have the 81, gotta have the 81.
Well, again, Mr. Zago is looking at pupil-teacher ratios in some of these classes. Are there people who are leaving, retiring, whatever, where we can transfer the position from one school to another, or you put it in another program in the same school? And those are the sorts of things that we will be looking at to tighten up that number.
Here's what we're willing to do, I think, just to kind of shorten it, because that's where everybody is now. That's why one reason we didn't want you to vote on it tonight. I said it'd be for several obvious reasons. I don't know what figure you're really comfortable with, but because you were going to have to vote on it also, and your reputation and mine, all of our standing, we go to county commission. You know, it's what we need. But if we think to start with something like 309 or something, and what we're willing to do is go in here, look at this, see where we think we can do it, probably take out raises and stuff like that, look at the number of teachers, look at the number of buses, look at all those things that we do, and come back something next Wednesday with you to see if we can get more towards that number. Because I don't see how tonight you can necessarily, we gotta make a recommendation to you. And again, using everything that we've got with several of us working together to see what we can do. So we're willing to do that if that's the direction you tell us to go. That's what I'm saying.
I mean, that's where I'm trying to go, to where we're not stringing this thing out for
Yes.
quite a period of time.
And we may do this, and the commission budget may come back and say, no, we're gonna give you this, which has happened in the past. And then there you go again, but
Well, Go ahead, Lon.
I just feel confident that if we take what looks like more than a bare bones budget, you know, that you and we will be able to defend this budget. And I think by next week, by the time you bring your recommendations and we continue to study it and we have some things to add to it, I'm gonna feel comfortable with taking, that final product to the commission, because it will have been vetted and looked at by a lot of, education advocates.
if we grew by 2.9% this year,
Yeah.
it's certainly reasonable to think it's probably gonna take about 3% more. I mean, that's where I'm coming from.
It's gonna be more than that, I'm telling you.
And you might have already answered this, but
What's this right here?
the, raises that you're talking about giving this year, how much
Which is gonna be
total
about what it
money
is this
is
year.
that costing?
I would have to, it is
Because if it's
something
bare bones, you're going the same numbers you had, it's probably gonna be about the same.
It's-
It
I
may,
don't
but
think
we've
it's
been
times
going up
two and a
every
half.
year for the
Okay,
last
that's
8 or
one.
10. No, our difference between the states.
Okay.
Somewhere in that range.
What we're educating.
Yeah, which makes that spread more clear.
Mr. Oldham and I were talking, Mr. Sandy, what's, just using these totals we're looking at here, per pupil cost.
And it would not be comparable to the state report card numbers at all.
Yeah,
Yeah, just that's, they make all sorts of adjustments, pull in cafeteria, pull in federal.
Right.
Cafeteria, he separated cafeteria out from this. You're not dealing with.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I was not able to get a cafeteria budget proposal ready for this meeting, because concentrating on this situation, but I will bring that next Wednesday.
And for people that's watched us on television and that sort of thing, roughly 82 to 83% of your budget is personnel.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when we talk about, we're spending so much time looking at this, I think that's where it is.
Mr. Odom, you've asked for some feedback and and you've suggested the idea of 309. I'm challenged to see how we get under 310. Yeah, it feels to me more like a 311, 311.5 kind of circumstance.
And if I may answer that, we will not expend all of this $302 million appropriation. So when we look at what we, that's where I get into the estimating, it's hard at this point. It'll get easy, by the time we finish May, I have May results, it'll be much tighter, we'll have 11 months out of the way, but we will not expend all of that $302 million. So when we look at our increase, our percentage increase to what we actually, as we narrow that figure down, that's the area where we can get under 310, because we will still be more than 3%.
So the baseline is not figuring off a 302, we're figuring.
It's really, yeah.
Okay.
Now, we cannot, and I say this to the commission and everywhere else, because of the laws we function under, we cannot spend 100% of our appropriation.
Right.
We can't exceed budget in any labor line item or in any major function. These 31 pages, we have stuff in 30 functions. We can't go over budget in any of those. So by the time you have a lot of unknowns come June as you're doing your final adjustments. You low as 1.5% that we did not expect of our budget. It was hard to get that low. Typically, we're around 2%. If we know we're going to have to put money into use fund balance to fund the next year's budget, we've been able to hit 3. That's a little painful to hit that 3, but if we don't have it, we're going to have to reduce our budget.
Okay.
So, but when you look at it that way,
That makes it possible, but still not comfortable.
no, it's,
Yeah.
you know, I thought when we got this down to 314, until we looked at the revenue,
The revenue is what changed, because in the 317 that you saw was, he had to put in this budget, your first draft, the 2% from the government. Now there's no percent from the government.
Yeah.
Now, we did take some 1% for local to try to cover some of this insurance, but, I mean, that, again, is subject to, that's a huge chunk, because that's all local.
I don't think I've seen a comfortable budget yet.
You're fixing to find out.
Okay.
but again, we will, Mr. Odom, I hope Mr. Zago and we will be comfortable that we will cover that growth in classroom teachers. Or that's the point at which we would be telling y'all, whoa.
You know, and the other thing that's in the background, we met this week, Mr. Clardy was sitting there with us. You know, in a part of our conversation, we were thinking, ooh, there's a cracks ceiling at Smyrna Primary, you know, we have all of that going on. Ms. Barnes is there with us too, and HR, Mr. Zago's there, and I'm there, and we're sitting and looking at this and looking at ways, what can we do? So, I mean, even to get to some of this point now, I'm a person, I bring the whole team in, and we begin to look at it and see what we can do. And everybody's certainly interested in their area, you know. But we have to reach some consensus, and priority one is our mission, which is serving the boys and girls of Rutherford County. So we've got to meet those pupil-teacher ratios. We've got to ensure that our instructional program remains as strong as we can make it. We have to do a lot of things to accomplish that task in a lot of areas, but it boils down to you've got to have that instructional program. Safety and everything wise.
You've got an additional handout here that covers the major capital projects.
Yes, sir.
Is there a discussion of that?
And this budget, and again, it's about 4.4 cents now because of the reappraisal years. What it comes down to, we should have, like most column, $3,362,000, $3,263,627. I said that backwards, but anyway, we will pay about $50,000 of trustees' commission. So our budget for these projects is the default, $2,312,202. Mr. Clardy's list is behind that. And these aren't in priority. So basically, the roofs, and hopefully we can squeeze in the HVAC integrated control system at Blackman Middle. And then we will have used up the available funds unless somebody gets moved. This is an area that we need to start building support. It really needs to be more long-term, because our goal was not to use borrowed money for projects like this. That's what we used to do. We've had money left over from the building program, and we would amend it into doing these major repairs, which they do. They add a long enough life to your building and all that. I can see using borrowed money, but we would prefer, the commission would prefer to use current operating money. With the number of schools we've got now, we need more.
Let me ask you this question, and I think you've already answered it for us once on the other night. Remember, we started out with 5 cents on the tax rate. And because of certified rates again, that 5 cents we only get for that now,
About 4.4.
about
The dollars have been held and have gone up some, but they would have gone up more. And as you see from Mr. Clardy's list, we have pretty good cause for 2.86 million.
And how does a straight 5% equate? If 4.4 is,
5 cents this year would probably, well, it would be close, it would probably be 2.4 million. It wouldn't be a lot higher.
2.4 after trustees?
Yes, and that's just a loose estimate.
I would support asking for that. I really unapologetically will say that the expenditures that we've made in facilities has been worthy and credible. In addition to what we do in educating students at $1,200 a pupil under the state average, we also build facilities at thousands of dollars less than comparable facilities around the state. We have efficiencies that are built in, but if we ignore the maintenance of those facilities, we will dig ourselves a hole that we will not be able to recover from. And so to reset that to 5 cents is a reasonable request to put forward, and I think that it's appropriate.
And that may be a resolution that we want to run through at one of your meetings and let us take it to the commission. Because really with the 4.4, when we certify the rate again, it's gonna be less than the 4.4. You know, that's unless they do something about exactly what you're talking about.
And it is, you know, in a year where the norm is not, no, we're not raising tax, we're just resetting. We're resetting. Let's reset to the original intention of 5 cents so that we can maintain 8, 9, 10 more buildings than we did when we originally put that in place. Sure. You know, that's a whole lot more investment, and we're showing ourselves as good stewards of that money to maintain those facilities, and facilities that are far older than the up-to-date facilities that we've got. There are sloped roofs that need to be put in place. We looked at that when we were at the school board convention, and the possibilities that are there for long-term investment, for long-term performance. I think we should float it.
Why don't you write, if it's okay with this board, Mr. Chair, I don't mind asking Mr. Samick to write us kind of a resolution or something that we'll run through. We have another, the next board, we could do it for either next Wednesday or your next board meeting, to ask again to go back to that 5%. So if that's okay, we can do that.
You good? So, back to your original, I guess, request or whatever. Do any board members want them to work on a different figure, or?
If they can bring it in under 310, it will be impressive, and I think that it shows an outstanding commitment to the citizens of Rutherford County that we're going to bring it in as tight as we possibly can. I still struggle to see how it gets under 310, but trust Mr. Sandvik, Mr. Odom, that if they see the way, then let's look at it.
Well, we'll get to look at it next Wednesday.
You may want to add back. I mean,
Yeah,
literally.
yeah, we may want.
That's what we'll be voting on next time is,
Yes.
But why don't
is what do we want to take to the commission?
why don't we treat it, and I agree with what Mr. Holliday is saying too, why don't we just let them bring us back what you think the lowest you can go?
We'll be glad to do
I
that.
mean, along the lines of what, you know, 'cause I'm like Mr. Holliday, I don't think you can go much lower,
Yeah.
based on your growth and everything. Is that okay? I mean, to look at,
That's fine.
you know, if it comes back in at 312, it comes back at 312.
I would say also, I think it's appropriate for the will of the board to reflect no less than a 3% increase in student population as we figure these things. And quite frankly, I would be comfortable to see that at 3.5, because the way the economy is working, the way that we see the apartment complexes being permitted, the available lots that are build ready that are sitting, in Rutherford County, the economic impact. I would be interested in other board members' thoughts, minimum 3% for all figure and calculation and estimates. And quite frankly, I think there's a case for 3.5.
Now, we've got that 1.245 or so in there for raises. I mean, you have options such as one-time bonuses to try to help with insurance or other, but y'all want to give us any direction on that or anything on what you think? That's obviously
I have some thoughts on that, if y'all trust me to come up with a version.
Well, my immediate thought, and pardon me, I don't want to dominate this, other board members can share an opinion, but if we did structure it in a bonus format, and then we found that 3% turned into 3.5%, and we had an influx of students that were, 15, 16, 1,700 students come into class in August, then unfortunately, the board could be in a position to move funds to, from a bonus category to we gotta put teachers in the classroom and make that decision, in an amendment form. Is that correct?
you don't have to do it the first month. He can put it in the salary category. I mean, so you probably wouldn't pay it out to you're probably gonna know
Right.
reasonably well before you could get around to doing it anyway.
Well, and then, again, our cushion is ending fund balance for those type of emergencies.
That's true. That is true.
Yeah, I mean, the only drawback, the last thing I wanna do is tell them they're gonna get something and have to renege on it.
I know.
Yeah. Well,
I'm not gonna do it,
yeah. But again, any fund balance is our emergency fund,
Yeah.
so.
Okay.
Yeah, I just can't see giving raises when at the same time we're cutting positions if we have to,
I don't think we're cutting, we may just not add as many
not have to add.
as we would want to.
Or fill some
Yeah.
vacancies.
Yeah, there is some attrition.
Yeah, do we know how many, are retiring?
Yeah, we've got a count, but most of those would have to retire. How many?
We have a list of 90, but that 90 was generated beginning after the retirement reception last year. So we started before the list. But I think effective this May, somewhere around 65.
But that really doesn't have any impact on this, because in most of those cases, somebody retires, you're going to have to hire
Replace 'em.
another one, just
Yeah.
to maintain your pupil-teacher ratio. Only in cases where we're seeing that we have that ability that are not enough kids there for taking that course or whatever it is, can we do that?
What are we spending per pupil?
Ooh, I didn't bring that with
I mean,
me
you have-
tonight. I go back to the report card
Seven,
thing.
Well, you have some fixed costs that
Yeah,
are,
8,000,
I thought it was 82.
it's about 8,200, somewhere.
8120.
I want to say 8128, but I may be wrong.
I think
It's somewhere in that
Okay.
range.
Why rounded it?
Okay.
Won't we, unless anybody else has anything else, I like Mr. Holliday's idea, the 3 to 3.5%, as far as work off that range and, see what you can come up with that we could possibly work with. I mean, instead of 3.5, you may want to take 3.25, just
Yep.
midway. But I think you're gonna definitely see the number. And my thinking is, I don't want us to cut ourselves short.
Just this GPS budget before any of the adjustments the state does, so it's all apples to apples. With that projected student number, about 7,340 per 7,340.
But you got food service and all that comes out in that report card and all too.
Yeah,
So
yeah. And
that
that's
number,
federal money,
that's
so
what
it's-
changes
It's
it.
not comparable at all.
not apples and apples comparison.
Could these general school purpose amendments be done tomorrow night, or do they need to be done
I
tonight?
mean, do we have to have it, we don't have it on our agenda, is that an issue
Oh,
for tomorrow night? I don't
oh,
think.
okay. I don't know.
Yeah, you can have
We could add them under other
Do you want to do that?
business.
Sure.
Sure, we can do that. We just need to get it on there, and you accept it
I mean, I'm just throwing that out, whatever the board desires.
What's the pleasure? We'll add it tomorrow night?
That's good.
Be fine.
It'll give us a chance to read them and then just go through them real quick tomorrow night.
And these are just the routine.
Clean up.
Clean up stuff.
We have to do
Right.
every year. Some of the later ones would not be as routine, but these are
Sure.
purely.
We're planning to leave the raises in at this time, right? We're not-
I don't think we can leave 1.245%. I mean, I don't think we can get down to that and leave that, when that's a $2.5 million figure. I mean, you can do something, and that's what we'll have to look at.
And I have a scenario in mind, I have no idea what it will translate into dollars, I'll just have to put it together and see. And it might be clear that it isn't sustainable.
And where education and student teaching is our goal, our most important asset is also our people.
Well, this may be redundant, but if we have 1,450 students, 1,450 students at 7,340, then we're over $10 million if we maintain that same per pupil cost. So,
Well,
I mean, there are some fixed expenses in there that won't change, but, you know, that's way on up toward what you're saying, for sure.
When Mr. Sammy came to me the first time and told me this, he said, I'm looking at a budget was very similar to the last one that Mr. Watson had to do, where we wound up of laying off people. I said, don't tell me that.
Yeah, not fun.
But the issue when you have certified tax rates and election year, not any business to do, and the governor going from $5 or $6 million in growth down to $1 million to $1.5 million, I mean, you're moving in large increments.
And the insurance component that you pointed out, where if we were spending more money by being a part of the state's, we're already being more efficient, being Rutherford County self-insured, and yet denied some benefit there that the state legislature has done. So it is kind of a perfect storm.
Anything else? We'll take this up, next Wednesday, Ms. Michaels?
Yes.
All right, and then, I think everybody got the notice on the changes, meeting changes. Other than that, I guess we'll see each other again tomorrow night. So, nothing else, we're adjourned.